One.
Hi, how's everyone doing? I'm Chris. I'm here with Mariah, Dom, and Zeke, and today we're going to go over the NFL CBA. As you know, the CBA for the NFL is over 700 pages, so fitting all of that in a 10 to 15-minute presentation is almost impossible. So we picked out a handful of things that we found to be interesting and important to talk about. So just going through what we're going to talk about, going to give a brief history of the NFL. Dom's going to go over contracts and salaries. I will briefly go over the salary cap. Zeke will go through how the rosters are made up and how the league schedule runs. I will then go through the NFL draft, and Mariah will finish talking about medical care for the athletes and also injury compensation. So just to start and give a brief history of the NFL, was founded in 1920, started with 10 teams. Later on merged with the AFL, which was the other competing football league at the time, and became known as what the NFL, as everyone knows it today. Now there's 32 teams in the NFL. They have an average worth of $3 billion. The Cowboys are viewed as the most valuable franchise in all of sports in the entire world at over $9 billion. Their latest media deal they just signed was worth $110 billion between ESPN, NBC, CBS, Fox, so the major TV people. And now the NFL is seen as the leading sports league in the entire globe. All leagues look up to the NFL and try to copy them and emulate what they're doing. So now Dom is going to go into how the player contracts are paid.
Well, now that we're getting into contracts, teams must negotiate in good faith with the player, and all agreements must be documented in partnership with the NFL and NFLPA to establish transparency with all parties involved. Within their contract, the key section we want to focus on relative to sports business is independent negotiation for endorsements. Player contracts cannot contain individually negotiated clauses that transfer the player's IP rights to the team, affiliates, or sponsors. This prevents teams from exploiting a player's intellectual property for their marketing purposes without negotiating separate agreements. This also allows players to independently negotiate endorsement deals with various companies and brands to increase their earnings and brand image. However, there are some guidelines they must follow. The main guideline for players is the only limitation they have for companies they can endorse is companies who are associated with substances on the banned PED list. Free agency is an important part of the NFL as a way to increase player movement within the league and allow players to increase their career earnings or brand image while maintaining a competitive balance within the league. At the start of the league year, free agents are allowed to meet with teams and sign a contract. Restricted free agents are still under the control of their previous team and have the right to match the contract they signed. Teams can place a qualifying offer on a restricted free agent to receive draft compensation from the team who signed them. Unrestricted free agents do not give the team any protections in retaining them after they sign a contract with another team. Teams can also place either a franchise or transition tag to retain a player for an extra year at a salary determined by the average of the top salaries at their position from the previous season to negotiate a long-term contract. The use of free agency gives teams opportunities to energize a fan base and develop new relationships through marketing campaigns, while players can increase their brand image through new sponsorship deals. And now I want to move into player salaries. So moving into player salaries, a minimum salary is determined each year by the player's experience in the league and increases as the player accrues more seasons in the NFL. Teams can also add signing bonuses, which gives the players more money up front and to give the team more flexibility in the long term. They can also offer incentive bonuses to players that can be earned based on their in-season performance in their contract and by meeting other contractual obligations, incentivizing the player to meet those obligations. These two bonuses can provide teams flexibility with a player's contract and can be beneficial in salary cap management for the team. It also provides salary cap challenges to the organization by forcing them to make decisions regarding who to retain on the roster when signing bonuses and incentives get into contracts. So moving into retirement, after a player files for retirement, they may be eligible to receive retirement benefits based on their credited seasons. Teams are required to annually contribute to fund the retirement plans and provide benefits to former players eligible. In addition to receiving benefits, the 2011 CBA established a second career savings plan to assist players after football. The player contributes a set amount each season, and the NFL will match their contribution to incentivize the program's players to use the program. The NFL providing players a resource for after football will allow the league to create a positive public image with increased player retention and reduced post-career financial struggles. Additionally, this can incentivize players to continue their careers to ensure they will receive retirement benefits from the league. And now I want to toss it back to Chris to talk about the salary cap.
So now moving into the salary cap, which ties directly into what Dom was just talking about, because it takes the contracts of which Dom was speaking about, and now we have to build a team with all of them. So what is the salary cap? It's a set limit of how much teams can spend on those contracts to build out their rosters. And how it is calculated is based off the league's previous year's revenue. So that's between the TV, ticket sales, merchandising, now with new gambling sponsorships, that's gambling revenue, and really any other sponsorship deals that they have made to make money for the league. That is then divided up by the 32 teams, which then gives a number that those teams are allowed to spend up to on their player contracts. And why is this used? It's used to keep a competitive balance throughout the league. So we don't have an instance like we do this year in baseball where the Dodgers have spent hundreds of millions more than other teams in the league spending on the best players. And then just to run some numbers, as you can see, the salary cap has exponentially grown over the years. And next year's salary cap is slotted at $255 million per team, which is a $30 million increase from the year before, which is the largest it's ever been. So now I'm going to send it to Zeke to discuss how the rosters are built in the league.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the roster makeup of the teams in the NFL. So looking at the roster size, it's always compromised of the active list and the inactive list. Combined, these two cannot exceed 53 players. There are certain examples when a team signs two practice players from their practice squad onto the roster. But during the regular season, most teams have 53 players, but don't exceed 55 at any time. So each team has a practice squad made up of 14 players. And one interesting thing I saw was that each team has an extra additional spot for an international player. So any player that does not have a residency within the United States, they can be on somebody's practice squad without counting towards their 14-player limit. Interesting thing about the practice squad as well is that at any time, a player on the practice squad can sign with another team. So say, for example, the Cowboys were interested in a player on the Packers practice squad, they can negotiate a contract at any time and sign that player from the Packers practice squad to their practice squad. These practice squad players also receive a base salary, and it varies based on your experience within the league. But initially in 2024, each player on the practice squad will receive at minimum a base salary of $12,500 weekly. Moving on to the waivers, when a team decides to release a player, depending on your status within the league, how many seasons you've played. When released, if you play less than 4 seasons, you'll go through the waiver system, which is a 24-hour period where any team in the NFL can claim your rights. If they don't, within this 24-hour period, you're able to go into free agency, as Dom talked about earlier, where you're free to sign with any team and negotiate a contract. When a player is waived, they must be given a notice of termination. They cannot just be told about it. They must have an actual physical proof of paper as well, as long as with being told. And the NFL and NFLPA have agreed to have the NFL team send a roster for their opening day roster, as well as their final day rosters to ensure transparency. And next, we'll be talking about the league schedule. So looking at the league schedule, it's comprised of 3 key elements: the preseason, the regular season, and the postseason. In the preseason, it starts with off-season workouts, which the CBA states that they are voluntary and that no player should be punished for their ability or their willingness to not participate in these workouts. They cannot be longer than 9 weeks out of a 12-week period. Next, they have mini camps. Teams are allowed to have 1 mandatory mini camp, which cannot exceed 3 days, and is no contact. Is really key to just get the players in the building, get them familiar with each other, and get ready for next season. Training camps is where it becomes mandatory. There's no options on training camps. Each player is provided room and board, a per diem, a weekly per diem, and the NFL has specified that they have 5 days on the field with specific restrictions on that. The preseason, it consists of 3 games out of 4 weeks, with each team receiving a bye. Moving on to the regular season is an 18-week schedule, but each team plays 17 games and they're given one bye week. In this bye week, they must have a minimum of 4 days off to ensure they're getting their necessary rest. And during the season, they have capped it out at 14 padded practices, which must be completed within the first 11 weeks of the season, just to make sure that they aren't, doing too much. Moving on to the postseason is comprised of the playoffs, which is the wild card, the divisional, the conference championship, and the Super Bowl. Each team and each player that participates in these playoff games receive extra additional compensation with that increases as they progress throughout the playoffs. This also applies to the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl players also receive additional compensation, and they have their spouses paid for to come on the trip. And one interesting note was that these payouts are guaranteed no more than 15 days after the culmination of the season. And now we'll be moving on to Chris and the draft.
And another aspect of the CBA, and one that I personally am biased towards and am a junkie of, is the NFL draft, which happens to be coming up in a couple weeks from now. What is the draft? It's an annual event where college football players are selected and added to NFL team rosters. And this is to help not only replenish the teams, but also the entire league with youth and younger talent. So as the older crop of players leave, you infuse with a new generation of players. There are a couple of stipulations to be able to enter the draft. You must be 3 years removed from high school to be eligible to enter the NFL draft. How it is set up, it's 7 rounds over 3 days. And now it's become so popular that the first round gets its own night on primetime television for everyone to watch. And once rookies are drafted, their contracts are now fixed based upon the draft selection where they were picked. Whereas pre-2011, rookies could negotiate any contract they wanted. And the example I give is Matt Ryan, when drafted in 2010, signed a $72 million deal before he even took a snap. So this new CBA has now cap that and help the teams be able to afford their rookies while also being able to pay for free agents at the same time. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mariah to talk about medical care for the current athletes.
So I'm looking into medical care. Each club is required to have a board certified physician, as well as a orthopedic surgeon, a primary care physician, as well as a whole team of consultants. And these consultants include neurology, cardiovascular, nutrition, behavioral health, and pain management. Each club must also have a head athletic trainer as well as 2 assistant athletic trainers. And they also have to have a full-time physical therapist. There is something called the NFL's Player Association, and there is a medical director who oversees the safety of the athletes. And this medical director votes on many different safety committees, such as accountability and care, general medical matters, head and neck and spine concerns, pain management, mental health and wellness, and even going down as the field surface safety and the equipment safety as well. So players have the actual right to seek medical opinions outside of the club, and that is also covered by the club. And they also can choose a surgeon of their choice in terms of if they're needing medical care that far. Each club must also have an approved mental health emergency action plan, and they have to be able to respond to a mental health crisis or any health crisis, but this could be suicide risk or extreme stress incidents, and this would be led by the team physician. Clubs can also not conduct their own testing for anabolic steroids, as well as drugs or alcohol. Now going into injury and compensation. The injury protection benefit plan, as well as an extended injury protection benefit for the players who suffer from severe injuries during their time in the NFL, outlines how the money will be allocated between team salary and player benefit costs within different years in the league. Players must also have a guarantee clause within their contract, which will assure them of receiving a certain amount of money if they get hurt. The club is also obligated to pay players while in rehab for given injuries, and they also must provide a salary within the year of the injury occurring. All of these injuries, in order to receive compensation, must be injuries related to football. And if there is an injury that is not related to football, the club is going over that and figuring it's based on their discretion if they're going to pay for that medical care. And that is it.
And thank you for listening to our little presentation.